Greetings, everyone. I am very excited today to be in conversation with Lauren Hubele, and we're going to be talking about some extraordinary work that she's doing. And I am doing this interview as part of my ongoing series of interviewing people that I see as Aquarian pioneers. In the midst of all the turbulence that we're seeing in the world right now and the deconstruction of old systems and structures and paradigms, it's also a time of heightened creativity. And I think what you're doing, Lauren, both in your healing work, what you've done in terms of establishing the Gemmo Forest, is truly Aquarian paradigms in action. But let me just give a little bit of a bio for you,
Sure.
and then we'll be in conversation. So, Lauren is a gemmotherapist and has started the first and only Gemmo Forest in the United States on her 12 and a half acres of land in Keene, New Hampshire. And what began as what was intended to be a hands on classroom to teach gemmotherapy has grown into something larger and something you never really expected it to evolve into. It's a plant and tree nursery, educational outreach program, and a grassroots initiative encouraging neighborhoods to replace their lawns with herb and vegetable gardens. The farm involves growing plants, trees, and shrubs, not only for their medicinal benefits, but for the vitality and well being of all who interact with it. She's also one of the founders of the Coherence Lab, and we may get into conversation about that also, and has an upcoming book, The Art and Science of Gemmotherapy, that will be coming out this summer. So, welcome, Lauren, and thank you for being in this conversation today.
Well, Heather, thank you so much. I feel really honored to be here. I've listened to your program for so long and never really envisioned that this would be an opportunity to be able to speak with you directly. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And let me just say, we connected through people that we know in the PHA, and we
Yeah.
were originally talking about your work with the Coherence Lab. And then you started telling me about the Gemmo Forest. And I just think it is so exciting. But before we get into that, let's just talk about gemmotherapy for those who may not know what that is, because that in and of itself is a very innovative form of holistic healing.
Yeah. Heather, it's innovative on so many levels, and I hope I can articulate all of them to you. The first reason it's innovative is it's the only plant medicine that uses living fresh buds. And these are not the flower buds, these are the leaf buds of trees and plants. And it also, in some of the plants, we're using young shoots. So, for instance, in wild rose, it's as it begins to shoot out. And we're hitting that time right now. In fact, I'm hosting in my community today a Gemmo making series. So we can all begin to spot those buds very easily in our own gardens and our own forests. But that's what makes it innovative because it's using that fresh bit of the plant that contains all the healing potential of the plant. So it's very much like human stem cells. Gemmotherapy contains plant meristem cells, and the part that's used is always the part that contains the most meristem cells in that plant. And so we're getting this action of cleaning, rejuvenating, and rebuilding at a cellular level from the extracts.
And they're really rejuvenating to the immune system, aren't they?
Well, Heather, they're rejuvenating to the entire body, and the immune system impacts everything. So, whether we're talking about the nervous system or the adrenal glands or the reproductive system, they're rejuvenating to all systems. based on which extracts you're using and in which way you're using them.
So they're different from herbal tinctures, which use the plants, the leaves that are more fully grown or in bloom. This is really the initiation of the life of the leaf or
Exactly.
the plant.
It contains the whole life force of the plant. And I often talk about the difference between herbal remedies and supplements and homeopathy because they each are working differently, not only in the body, but they're using a different source. And what source we use impacts what the outcome will be.
And say a little bit about what the origins of gemmotherapy are. I understand it dates originally back to ancient Egypt, but more recently was developed in Romania and parts of Europe before coming to the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah, well, there's records that take it back to Egypt. There are records from Hildegard of Bingen, of course. And then the materia medica that became part of the European pharmacopoeia, so it became codified in Europe, comes out of the work of Dr. Paul Henry. He's from Brussels, Belgium, and he was working with a team of researchers, and their project was to find what part of the plant or the type of plants that would interrupt the progress of disease in the blood system. And they were working with different types of herbal medicines. And it was actually when they were digging deeper and deeper and hadn't found their answers that they came across some of the work of Hildegard's on the use of plant buds, specifically black currant buds. And this is probably part true and part folklore, but I like to believe Hildegard had a say in that they went ahead and tested it and they found exactly what they were looking for. So then they worked their way through a set, and I think about that time it was probably 30 traditionally known plants and trees that had been used in herbal medicine until that time, and began forming a basis of the work. And then since then, it just got it adopted in various countries and different. It's interesting. I mean, that would be an interesting sociological study, like why Romania, right, and why Italy, and why Switzerland, but and why not Germany, right? It never took off there, but that would all just be speculation at this point. But today, it's actually used by medical doctors in Romania and Italy. It's studied in a number of universities, and we're directly working with a laboratory in the western part of Romania in Arad, who does extensive research in their school of pharmacy.
So you've been doing gemmotherapy for years.
Yeah.
Tell the story of how you started the Gemmo Forest and what's
Oh,
unfolded from that.
yeah, yeah. Heather, I mean, as you I was teaching because first and foremost, I'm always a teacher. That was my first career, and then I became a practitioner. And then when I came across the the impact that of what these extracts could do and the potential, and began creating a system to make it accessible, um, I looked for ways to teach because you want to share it with others. And this was not information I knew just for myself. It was meant for everyone and first practitioners. And then I wanted moms to understand and beyond that. And so I kept getting this vision that really the way I could really teach people is if we had a place where the plants were actually growing and people could observe the plants, interact with them, learn from them, make the extracts, and then they could embody what these were truly about. And that you know how it is, how there those things don't leave you alone when they enter from other realms. And it kept coming up. And we searched in different areas, and I thought for a long time it would happen in France because there's such a openness to gemmotherapy there, and many of the trees and shrubs grow there. And then world situations changed, and France felt really far away from where my grandchild lived. And so um, a number of factors led us to the East Coast. And so we ended up making a home in Keene, New Hampshire.
And then what happened?
Well, yeah, well, first of all, I guess it's probably not fair to jump over the fact that you have to convince your family to move across country because of a dream you keep having about a forest. And but fortunately, I live with a wonderful set of humans that respect that type of information. Um, but Heather, we were looking for a place to buy. We couldn't find the acreage we needed. And I also needed a place that wasn't densely forested so I could integrate all these new plants and trees. So there was a lot of conditions involved. And we found a place, but it was minus the acreage I needed. And but it happened to have some adjoining land, and it was through this beautiful community that we've moved into through a series of connections that connected us with a landowner who had bought the land to protect it from development, but was willing to let us use it for a sustainable project and had been holding it for 25 years.
That
Yeah.
is great. So
Yeah.
it started
So
with that kind of collaboration and co-creation.
Heather, that's when you know you're on the right track. I mean, we've talked about this, and that was really this whole process unfolding for me is being careful not to get in my own way and enforcing my will on the process, because I knew this project wasn't about me. It was about building community, it was about following guidance, and it was about producing a model that others could copy. So I had to really pay attention. And to be really honest, I had never heard of Keene, New Hampshire until really, I think about 3 months before we moved here.
So this whole project was really a growing edge for you because you hadn't been growing plants in that kind of way prior to this either. Is that correct?
Yeah, growing is a great term, right? Growing and letting go of how I thought this should happen and then learning to grow. So, Heather, I grew up in the Sacramento Valley, and I did grow up on a farm. I was in 4-H. I grew gardens and plants, but that was something I walked away from at 17. I'm 65 now. So there's been a little bit of a gap and some other things happening in my life. But you know what's really amazing? And I think this is really important. If people don't take anything else out of there, I think growing plants is in our DNA. And I believe the minute we start connecting with plants and the soil, those memories come flooding forward. I can't explain any other way of how I began to landscape and work with 12 and a half acres in building this forest, unless that was coming from a really deep source, ancestral, probably.
Well, and what's beautiful about that, you and I talked about this in an earlier conversation. I think there is something incredibly profound about what at whatever level, if we're working with a garden, we're reconnecting with the earth, with the energies of the earth, which know how to foster biodiversity, how to live in harmony. And I love that quote from the Ringing Cedars books by Vladimir Merger. If each of us had our own little garden, we would live in harmony with nature and it would change the world. That there is something so profound about coming back into relationship with nature, with the earth, and the way in which that can help us heal and then support us in this kind of collaboration with each other and healing of the world.
Oh, exactly, Heather. That's such a beautiful quote. I would say I've never met a grumpy gardener. Maybe you have, but I certainly haven't. And I think that the first thing that happens when we begin working with the soil is we connect to our own essence.
Mm.
And that's what I have found in my work and as a practitioner, that is the most challenging thing to support someone to reconnect, because all the therapies in the world can't promote something when you feel unsafe in your own body.
Yeah. And that part of what connecting with nature is about is finding that place of connection that can feel grounding and safe and supportive.
Yeah. Yes, and Heather, on the other end of the spectrum, and I've worked with a number of volunteers last year, particularly young women felt really attracted to coming out and volunteering, that had to overcome a lot of anxiety about being in an open space like that.
Mm.
And it was a learning curve for me to see that, oh, wow, even something that has all the cues of safety for me might not have those cues of safety for others, and how to create programs that bring folks in a way that meets them exactly where they are. So this is where all my work as a practitioner has come in very handy as well.
So your forest has become a place for healing as well as for education on so many levels. It's helping people heal.
Yeah, Heather, I think if you spoke to anyone that's been on this land, nothing has to be done. And that was a really important lesson for me, that I didn't have to construct anything to help someone experience it. The land just comes right up and meets them where they are.
And you're also working with the principles of permaculture. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Heather. So when I knew that this was going to actually be realized, I needed some um, grounding in a philosophy that could guide me. And I felt really drawn to permaculture because it aligns with the same view I have about how the body works, and that we observe, and then we do the least harm, right? What is the least invasive process that we can use to interact and influence change, or a return to symbiosis, a return to harmony. And so that's what drew me there. And then there was a gentleman I had been following for years in Bulgaria, actually, who ran a program called the Polyculture Lab. And he did research and created this forest of his own there, not knowing about gemmotherapy, but about permaculture and applying principles. And part of the permaculture process is to produce medicine from our plants. So one of the ideals with permaculture is that all of our plantings have a purpose, and whether it be shelter, or it might be food production, or it might be medicine production, or plants for clothing, that they have these purposes. So anyway, in preparation, I entered into his year-long apprenticeship program, and that was very supportive in my process. It still doesn't prepare you for standing there with 12 and a half acres of land and going, right, now what I do. But it gave me some guidelines. And then I also worked with a young man that had um, consulted on a number of large farming projects in the US with landowners who were looking for ways to use regenerative farming techniques. And Zach is a good friend and would come out and just kind of support me more emotionally than anything. And we would start making these original sketches. But back to the permaculture, there's a few of the principles we've pulled in. When possible, we build on top of the soil. We're building soil. We're not digging down into the soil. We're not tilling. We're not, we're causing the least amount of invasive action on the soil. We're also using a lot of edges. So when we're creating gardens, we're keeping the wild edges. So we keep habitat right there where we need it. So we're bringing in beneficial insects to support our plants. We are organically certified, which isn't necessarily an overlap in permaculture, but it felt really important to me as the founder here to create that first bedrock of this is who we are and this is who we'll be and how we will interact with this land. We create things that, for instance, called a feathered edge, so that we're creating a wildlife corridor through the landscape. And by protecting the numbers of animal families that were already on this land, we have a coyote den and we have a couple nice fox families and lots of bunnies. And I wanted to make sure that their life wasn't disturbed by what we were doing, but give them their own space. And so that's one of the features. And then we work with this process that is really integral to permaculture is planting and plant communities. And there's a number of different ways, and often these terms get very confused and diluted out in the world, but I'm sure every gardener that's listening and you have heard about support plants and partner plants or plant buddies, right? Plants that help you plant your basil with your tomatoes and it supports it. They're like having a good neighbor. But then we also need a good community and we need lots of different kinds of support. And so then we start planting in plant communities that could be called polyculture communities. And they're plants that support the bringing up of minerals from the soil, enriching the nitrogen, um, bringing in pollinators, serving as nectaries for all of our feathered friends we want to invite in. And so that's another form of planting. And then there's an even more specialized form of polyculture called guilds. And it's something that we have created a number of examples for folks to come see so they can include them in their own gardens. And it features a production plant or tree. So it could be an apple tree guild, or it might be a raspberry guild, could be annual plants, but they're more often around a perennial tree or shrub, and then a host of support plants. So it's their plant community. And the idea is, and this equates so much to what we're trying to do out in the world today, is we build a community that is supportive, that will make that garden be autonomous and strong and be able to protect itself. And so that's what I've always liked to encourage in humans is building their team and community so they can step into their own power. And we're doing the same thing with plants.
Well, what's beautiful, Lauren, is in my understanding of permaculture and regenerative agriculture is all about mirroring the way the natural world works anyway, in terms of fostering biodiversity and plants that are naturally supportive of each other. And so it's about our coming back into those rhythms and principles of how nature works when it's in its own creativity. But we're coming back into relationship with that, moving away from the paradigms of traditional agriculture that have, as you said, often been invasive, and it's often about monoculture and
Mhm.
then using pesticides to try to protect the plants that are then products to be produced. Whereas part of what I love and what you're doing is you're building and working with the energies of nature in a way that are co-creating together, being in collaboration, being in relationship with the natural world and the balance and harmony of the natural world. And my understanding is permaculture is also attuning to the lunar cycles and the energies of the sky as well as the earth.
Yes, and this is where we get into these overlapping philosophies. That is biodynamic farming, which is very much geared, but they overlap. Regenerative farming, permaculture, biodynamic farming have overlapping ideas, but each with their own different slant. However, Heather, very much so are we aligning not only with the lunar cycles, but following the transits of the sun in my work, with deciding when I'm planting, what I'm doing, what my activities are, in what will be supported. What will what does nature support right now?
And part of what's beautiful, as you've described it to me before, is this Gemmo Forest has taken on more and more of a life of its own and is now supporting people in the community learning how to start their own gardens and converting their lawns into more gardens for their connecting with nature and growing plants and growing food. So it's really become a community project that is fostering this co-creation in the community.
Yeah, Heather, I believe this is when we have that um, e-ticket ride. It's when we get on that place where we can get ourselves out of the way. And trust me, it's a daily task for me to get myself out of the way. It doesn't always come easy. And let this project speak for itself, and let the land speak for itself, and hearing what this community really wanted, because I was clearly brought to this community. That was clear to me. And it's not about me, it's about what's needed here. And so when we held some of our first open days, what we kept hearing was, hey, this is really great that you're doing this, but how are you doing it? How did you create that guild? How did you create that way you're doing that with the soil? And we use Hugel culture beds, which is a form of raised beds where you dig down and fill them with debris that will degrade over time and feed the plants. But people want to know how. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And I found myself actually backing up more and more to what is it that's really being asked of me. And Heather, I think that's what's happening to all of us today, is to continue to revisit what's being asked of me here, right? What's being asked of me here now. And this has absolutely evolved. And this year were presented with an opportunity to apply for a People's Garden grant, and it's a really cool program put on by the USDA. In my understanding, this program is still viable at the moment of this airing, but we've applied for it, and the People's Garden grant supports initiatives like ours that are nonprofit, that are using sustainable methods for gardening and growing in an effort to support the community to learn how to do that themselves. Isn't that gorgeous? So there is already something out there working on a larger scale. And so we became registered as a People's Garden, and we applied for funding in that. But the process was what was really cool because it helped us define who we really were at that moment, at that time. So it's not so much about the grant and the grant money, that's great, but it was in writing it that got really clear, like, oh, wow, these are the people that have been supporting us and identifying us with us. We have an incredible amount of support in this community from different organizations. Our local organic co-op is sponsoring us. Our favorite town coffee shop sponsors us. We have sponsorships through the different farming organizations. And so the fact that these folks are all coming along is also, to me, an indication that that's what we're supposed to be doing. Just keep following that energy.
Well, and what's beautiful in what you're describing is I so believe the paradigms of the Aquarian age are about honoring our own unique gifts, bringing them into collaboration in community and co-creating together, honoring the biodiversity of our communities and looking at how we can work in that way that we're interdependent with each other, like the natural world, rather than operating out of that separate sense of self and what do I accomplish here and how do I compete and get on top, versus the Aquarian paradigm is about we're all in this together. How do we collaborate and see what unfolds as we bring our unique gifts into interaction with each other? And I love how this whole project just kept unfolding as you were listening to what was being called forth from you and what was coming out in collaboration with the community.
You know, Heather, I probably would need to say this because I think it's really important for others that are listening that have that thing in their heart, that's speaking to them and yet are afraid to make that step. I left behind two lovely daughters and my granddaughter in Austin to do this project. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I did it for them and the next generation coming. And I think we're going to be asked to do some really hard things as we move into this new age and maybe letting go of what feels really comfortable, because it certainly feels a lot more comfortable to be within 30 minutes of your family and not have to fly across the country to stay in touch. But if something is calling you to be done, I think it's very important to listen to and to know, even though it might be painful, it'll be supported in the end.
Well, and you had this dream and
Yeah.
this guidance, and you trusted it and followed it, not even knowing how it would all unfold and not even knowing fully what it meant to establish a Gemmo forest and not
Totally.
even knowing how you were going to get the land to do that. I mean, it's really, you kept stepping forward in trust.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of days I walk out on that land and I'm like, yeah, Lauren, you're planting a forest. What does that look like exactly? Well, you order a lot of trees. Luckily, I'm well past that point. It feels really good to be in year 3 now, and we have a really nice, um, I would say, footprint out there going that can just be continued to build on. And for me, every step of the way has been doing with two things in mind, aside from constantly listening to the land, is one, how do I build something that is reproducible in other communities? Because I think that's huge. I'm a real believer in E.F. Schumacher's work. Small is beautiful. We're not meant to create mega programs. We create what really works for our community and let others come and copy it. So that's been a model for me and a guide. And then the other thing is, what's my exit strategy? Because I want this to be an ongoing project for generations to come. And how do I bring young people into our board? How do I hold space for others to also have their visions realized in this project? Um, and so that's been a real interesting dance after living a life of running my own LLC and, doing it my way, right? But it's been very important. And again, I think those are also in part of this Aquarian age that's coming forward.
Absolutely. And it really has been a project where you've listened to the land, but also really been listening and in relationship with those in the community. And I love how it has continued to morph and spread because of that co-creation. And I think it's so significant that so many people now are converting their lawns into gardens.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a new project. We're in year one of it and it's on its way. But it was for me a way to be of service to the community. And so we have this wonderful example here at the forest. Come look at options and here's how you can do this yourself, and then getting out in the community and encouraging folks to do this. So, as I said, this is year one. We're launching it now. We're providing kits for folks, support kits of plants to get involved. And we have cute little yard signs. The program's called More Food, Less Lawn. Um, and again, that program itself is being embraced by a number of businesses and organizations in town. So our goal this year is to collectively convert 1 acre of lawn in town, and then moving that up to 3 acres the following year, and 5 acres within our third year. So we'll see. We'll see if that's meant to be or not.
And again, it's trusting what unfolds and the co-creation process.
Yeah.
The other principle that I think that is so profound, that is a part of the Aquarian age that you're really attuning to, is the whole theme of being in right relationship, being in right relationship with the earth, with the plants, with the trees, with the community, with ourselves. And one of the things that I love in what you're doing, and that I think is so important with gemmotherapy, or I have my own training in herbal tinctures and herbal therapy. But to me, what I realized in that process that's most important is not looking at the plant as a source of medicine, but being in relationship with the plant. That awareness that the earth is sacred, that all of the plants, the animals, the insects are sacred. All of them have consciousness. They know how to live in right harmony, right relationship with each other. We're the ones needing to heal to come back into right relationship with them, but they can teach us and guide us in how to do that. And then they're a medicine for us on so many levels.
Yeah, just that process alone is healing. And Heather, I tend to think that we all are in right relationship, and we have lost our way of seeing it. Like we don't have it in our view because of all the conditioning that we have. And there was something else you said that just came up, and you know this hasn't all been the yellow brick road coming through this, because there's a lot, particularly in the agricultural and growing community. Um, there's a lot of righteousness and about I'm doing it the right way. I'm treating the soil right, and no, but I'm treating the soil right. And I discovered a number of camps, which I do not believe is the way forward. And so, one of the things I have found that we can do really well is to form bridges between these different philosophies. And so that was really important and continues to be a theme for me is that we don't have any dogma that we are subscribing to. What we're doing is we're listening to the land, we're responding with the best approach at the time. For instance, at one point we had to bring in a tiller to lightly till an area that had been hard packed over 25 years. So if I held tight to this, well, I'd be a bad person if I did that. I would never be able to move to the next stage. And so I think we all have to be really careful. And I'm not saying at all you were insinuating that, but it reminded me of this kind of tricky road we're all navigating right now.
Well, and my sense is, as you know, one of my specialties is the processional cycle. And I think that starting in the age of Aries, we got caught in the paradigm of separation
Oh yeah.
and power over and competition, which can lead to polarization, can lead to my way is the right way, your way is the wrong way. We're still, I think that carried over into the age of Pisces, and we're still in a process of clearing that to move into the Aquarian paradigms. So I think you're right. The conditioning that we've had culturally, really for the last 5,000 years, has been about a paradigm of separation and polarization and division and hierarchy. And we're now really trying to be more conscious of that, to clear that, to heal from that. And again, I think that's where nature can help us remember what it means to be in right harmony, interdependent, rather than clinging to that sense of separation. And then we can bring that into community and interaction with each other when we can remember what's in that ancient wisdom within us of what it means to honor everything around us as valuable and sacred and honor that interdependence and interconnectedness rather than getting caught in those power over paradigms or paradigms of polarization and separation, which are really extreme in the world right now. Because I think as we're leaving behind the age of Pisces, the time of the Kali Yuga, all of those old paradigms that need to heal and clear are up in our awareness, but we need to not get caught in them, but to see that those are the paradigms that are ending and then consciously be moving into these Aquarian paradigms. So you're right, it's not an easy process. And we can still be feeling that sense of transition out of those old ways of being into new paradigms. But what I love is you're working that and you're working that consciously and you're working that in relationship with the land, in relationship with the community.
Yeah, it's a completely a work in progress, Heather. That is for sure. And I think about as we were moving forward and just bringing out this More Food, Less Lawn initiative, I began meeting with different organizations and many that are involved in agriculture or conservation or and I, I was really surprised how polarized each of these organizations were just from one and another. Well, I'm in the it can only be this way camp, and I'm in the it can only be this way camp, and each one is so fixed on and that they are right, right? That is, I think that process, although it was a little painful to go through, was very healing for me to understand. Oh, this is where you're going to be working. You're going to be working in those in between spaces, not necessarily comfortable. Again, I think it's important to all of us stepping out and wanting to be in that zone of it. It is. It's also gets really uncomfortable at times, and you can feel really alone in the process.
Yeah. Because it really is about stepping into a paradigm of honoring diversity
Yeah.
and really being willing to be in that conversation with others with different perspectives and to listen and to communicate and to not get caught into that kind of division or polarization. But we're in that transition time, we're in that liminal period
Yeah.
culturally and collectively. But I think part of what you're talking about is the more we can stay in alignment with those Aquarian paradigms and energies that we're all being guided into, the more we're listening to the energies of the sky, of the cosmos, the more we're listening to the energies of the earth that are in so many ways trying to help us wake up and come back into balance. Then
Yeah.
we can work that in how we interact with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think as this comes up, there's so much conditioning that has to get out of the way. And one of the things that actually came out of this time of meeting with all these folks and understanding, oh, this is a lot more challenging than I thought, is planning a roundtable for our community in the fall where we could have the different stakeholders talk about their perspective and see what we can hear, like really hear in each other. So we'll be looking forward. There's a number of them that agreed that yes, this is a good idea. But Heather, I mean, learning how to negotiate that and how we will use land and respect it, to me, is the first work we have to be doing. We all want to be working up here and getting everyone to accept people from different places, but we have people that can't even agree about what kind of plants can grow on the land, right? And when we realize that's where we're stuck. How are we going to agree about people?
Well, and I think a key is what you just said a minute ago. That a key is being willing to truly listen to each other so that we are in communication and then can move into more collaboration. But
Right.
we're not listening and in that deeper conversation with each other, then it just gets caught in that kind of conflict and division.
Yeah, and that means I need to listen to my neighbor that likes to spray Roundup on his lawn and mow it 4 times a week to keep it like a golf course. It goes both ways. I need to hear what it is that he needs, so that I can have a better understanding and be compassionate with him, and we can find a place. And at the same time, I can continue being the example that I want to be, but it doesn't make me more right.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, such an important point. When we get caught in judgment, then we're already stepping into polarization and conflict.
Yeah, and it's a real trap.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is not only about listening to each other, but coming from compassion and coming from that ability to really see and hear each other. Well, before we stop, we don't have time to get into this much, but just share a little bit also about the Coherence Lab, because that is also about bringing practitioners together to collaborate and being in that capacity to be really hearing each other and hearing the person who's coming in to get guidance from different practitioners.
Yeah, I'll just give a short bit. It's in its embryo stage, but it's interesting because it's moved along and very much um, an alignment with opening the Gemmo Forest. And the energy's been there for the Gemmo Forest in a very different way. This has been a little slower process, but there's been a lot of learning and unlearning. But in short, what I've been working with as a practitioner myself and working with Gemmotherapy, I know Gemmotherapy isn't the only thing people need. I know that. I know acupuncture isn't the only thing people need, or I know shamanism or astrology, right? We need we need different tools at different times. And I wanted to understand that because part of I know my path of being here is how do we really heal and what does that mean, right? Um, and so I've been working with a collaborative group of women from different parts of the world, actually, in different modalities, in learning how to hold space together in respect of each other's um, lens that we look through, and doing a couple things, Heather. One, putting away our own expertise and our belief that we know the right way,
Mhm.
um, because that's really important. Two, I think we are moving out of this one on one healing type of work we've been doing for 100 years of I have an office, you come see me, I tell you what I think because I'm an expert in X. I think that's all changing. I'm not saying I have the answer, but we're experimenting with some models here. And then what we've been doing is inviting someone in with a particular challenge, whether it be mental or physical or um, spiritual, and holding space in a very different way than we as practitioners are trained to do. What we do normally is we do an intake, right? And we start asking questions. And we've taken more of an approach that's used in developmental coaching and also Gabor Mate's work on compassionate inquiry in allowing um, the person to just speak. And we may ask open ended questions to help them unpack it. But seeing that the power isn't in what I know about your situation, but it's about what you know and begin to see. Because we know that when the unconscious becomes conscious, then we can address it, right? This is Jung's work. And so by asking questions instead of um, pointing it out from our expertise hat, we're holding space in different ways. So right now we have a YouTube channel. We have a place where folks can contact us and offer to be a guest in our Coherence Lab circle. We also have a training program for practitioners that would like to begin working with a new model for themselves in this shifting paradigm of there's not going to be enough healers out there. We need to find some new ways of working.
And again, it's about collaboration and it's about mutuality. It's about respect, and I think it's beautiful. It's moving out of that one-on-one model, but it's also moving out of that paradigm, that hierarchical model of traditional medicine or therapies where I'm the expert, you're the one with the problem. I'll guide you what to do. This is really honoring that we have that wisdom within us. How do we support that in emerging from the person's own inner knowing? But I also love that it's what you're doing with the Coherence Lab as practitioners is, from my perspective, very much the ancient model of the council format. We sit in sacred circle and we each have some piece of truth or wisdom to offer, but it's how it all interweaves with one another that we come to that healing understanding rather than, again, as we were just talking about, it's not my way is the right way or my truth is the right truth. It's how do we honor that we each have some piece of the truth that we need to bring into sacred circle together. So I do think, again, that's the Aquarian paradigm we're moving into and moving towards.
Sure. I think it's going to be a little more challenging. Um, I think one of the most difficult things I see is practitioners struggling with all the conditioning that they've had about hanging on to their expertise, right? That's their safety, like a little bit of a life jacket going in.
Yes, although I have to say, I started doing these kinds of holistic uh, group meetings back in the 90s when I was clinical director of a traditional um, agency for, you know, therapy for children, families, and adults. People were hungering for it. The
Oh, sure.
practitioners loved it. So I think there's a way it really can foster community and again encourage diversity and connection and collaboration in a way that I think more and more we're all longing for. So it's opening the door to that and allowing us to step out of, again, that paradigm of separation. So thank you. You are an Aquarian, and thank you for being an Aquarian pioneer with what you're doing. And again, I really respect and honor that you're in the exploration. You're allowing yourself to listen to what you're being called to do, but then being in a process of listening and collaborating and reconfiguring as you go. And I think that's so much of what we're all needing to do as we're moving into this Aquarian paradigm. We don't yet know what all these forms are that are
Yeah.
emerging. So it's how do we stay open, stay in that co creative process with each other, with the earth, with the sky, that will be guided along the way.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you. And blessings on your Gemmo Forest.
Thank you so much.
And blessings and love to all of you.